Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to AuthorStory. I'm Alexander Lim, your host. And for this episode, I'm interviewing Ian Roberts, author of the book The Wonders of Language, or How to Make Noises and Influence People. And for those of you following along who are interested, you can go over now to the Amazon link in the description below the video and check out or get a copy of Ian's book. So, Ian, welcome to AuthorStory. Thanks lots for being our guest.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure.
Cool. So, Ian, to start things off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your author story?
I'm a professor of linguistics at Cambridge University in England. I've been there now since 2000, 17 years. Before that, I taught in Germany and in Bangor in Wales, and then before that in Geneva in Switzerland.
Wow, so 17 years. That's a pretty long career.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you're you're presently at the University of Cambridge again. Sorry.
Yes. I'm at Cambridge, England. Yes. Yes.
Professor of linguistics.
Yes.
All right.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Got that. So next to the book, Ian, would you mind telling us a little bit more about it and what it's all about?
Well, the book is really aimed at people who are interested in language and in linguistics, and it just provides a very basic introduction to all the main ideas that linguists have, that they've discovered or speculated about in relation to language over the years. Mm-hmm. It's kind of primarily aimed at younger people, maybe people finishing high school or starting college, mm-hmm. and thinking, with an interest in language or languages, and they might be thinking about taking a course in linguistics but don't really know what it is. Mm-hmm. So it's mostly aimed at that group, but really anyone with an interest in language.
Okay. And if I may ask, Ian, what made you decide to write the book? Was there some you thought, I really got to write this thing, or was it like the accumulation of maybe I should write something like this?
Actually, it wasn't like that at all. It was my son who suggested it to me about 3 years ago. He was 17 at the time, and he was just finishing high school. He took a course in English language, and he really liked it. And so he started to think about carrying on with that, something like that, in college. He was applying to college at the time, and he knew I was a professor of linguistics, but he'd never previously taken any interest in it. I was just dad. You never really think about what your parents do for a living, right? But then he did start to take an interest, and he said, Dad, you should write a book for people like me. And I just sort of laughed it off. I said, forget it. I couldn't do it. I'm too busy. I wouldn't know how to do it. But then he kind of planted an idea in my mind. So I did think about it for a while, and then I got this sort of how-to idea. The subtitle, How to Make Noises and Influence People, and all the chapter titles have sort of how-to titles: how to make noises, how to build a word, how to find a language. It's all this kind of thing. And once I got that idea for structuring it, I ran it by him. Mm-hmm. Said, would this appeal to you? And he said, sure, that looks nice. And so I just went ahead and did it. So that's really the story.
Okay, cool.
So it was my.
So how hard was it for you to write it? I mean, I understand you've written a couple of textbooks before. Was it difficult for you to write it, given your background in the academia?
Yeah. Yes. It is difficult because I've tried to make the style very, very accessible, but at the same time, I didn't want to dumb down the ideas,
right?
And so, getting the combination of accessibility, easy to read, while at the same time describing in some parts quite complicated ideas, is difficult. It was quite a challenge. But I'm reasonably pleased with the result. We'll see what people think.
Okay, well, hopefully people think great about it after they read it.
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah, I mean, it's quite easy to write about 5 or 10 pages in that kind of style,
right?
But it's very difficult to keep it up over 150 pages. That's it was a challenge.
Right.
So,
okay.
But anyway,
yeah. So you surmounted it, because you got a book out of it after all.
Yeah, that's right. And, some of it had to be drafted a couple of times, but that's normal, right? I mean, ask any author and they'll tell you that, some days it comes easy and some days it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
So, Ian, this book actually might deal with language and linguistics, but this is about communication more than anything else. So, I'm just curious. Do you speak anything about nonverbal communication in the book?
Not really, no. There's a little bit. I mentioned sign language, languages that deaf communities use, but that's not the same thing as nonverbal communication because although it's not spoken language, it is language,
Yes.
that's communicated through signs.
Right.
And I don't actually. I'm not. This is not really an area of expertise of mine, so I just mention it once or twice, but don't really go into it in any depth.
Okay.
And as for nonverbal communication, no, I don't really talk about that. It really is about language
Mm.
more than anything else.
Okay,
So,
got that. Okay, so Ian, would you have any idea when language, as we know it, first evolved among human beings? How old is the human methodology for language?
estimates vary very widely. It's at least 50,000 years old, probably older than that, probably something around 100 to 120,000 years. But it's very difficult to tell for sure because language doesn't leave any fossils, right?
Yes, yes.
I mean, when you find sort of bones of ancient humans or Neanderthals or what have you, you only find the bones. Everything else, the tongue and the lips, it just goes, right? And so we don't have, we can only make very indirect inferences about when language may have started, and so it's pretty speculative and controversial. But round figures say 100,000 years, maybe a bit more.
Okay, I got that. So I guess, so essentially, language has been around ever since we humans have been around then.
Yeah, that's the assumption humans, our species, Homo sapiens, we've always had spoken language ever since we first evolved. The really interesting and difficult question is whether other pre-human species, such as Neanderthals,
Right.
had language. That's a debate which has been going on for years, and it's not really resolved. Because, as I said, it's very, very hard to tell.
True, true. I mean, there's no artifacts, there's no references, nothing like that of their language if
Yeah.
they had any left. Mm.
That's right, exactly,
Mm.
exactly. So there's just almost no evidence, or only very, very indirect evidence. So, like from the structure of the skull or something like that, but it's really hard. It's very difficult.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, fortunately, that's a bit of an open question.
Mm. Okay, cool. I got that. So Ian, I'm familiar with language, kind of, but when I'm familiar with this, what I taught in school, nouns, verbs, grammar, and the like, your book goes a lot
Mhm.
more into that. Um,
Yes.
let's say we're starting from scratch. What does it take for a language to be created?
Well, really, it takes a human being. That's probably the simplest answer. I mean, in a sense, languages are being created all the time anew by young children when they learn their first language, because they don't really just imitate their parents or teachers or siblings or whatever. They kind of invent their own version of the language afresh every time. So really, I think what it takes to invent a language is just a human. And, at some point, coming back to evolution, at some point at the beginning of our species, the first humans somehow created language. Maybe there was something simpler before that with the Neanderthals or something, but as I said, we don't really know. So yeah, it takes a baby. It takes a toddler.
All right, and he gets a language, of course, as he grows up. Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Ian, if I may ask, how does language create a reality for people? I mean, I'm thinking along the lines of like Alaskans having several different words for ice and snow, but people in the
Yes.
tropics, they don't have any such words for things. So, how does language help create the reality?
Well, that again is a very much debated question, and it's difficult to be sure. The story about Eskimos and snow, by the way, isn't quite true. It kind of got exaggerated as it was retold.
Okay.
Lots of languages have quite a few words for snow. I mean, if you think of the language of skiers and skiing vocabulary, they can describe all different kinds of, degrees of snow
Right.
to how it's melted, how flaky it is, and so on. So basically, if you kind of need words for something, then people come up with them. So yeah, if you live in the jungle, you don't need a word for snow, but you might need a word for all kinds of snakes and insects, right? And if you live in Switzerland and you ski a lot, you might have a lot of words for different kinds of snow. Also, if you're an Eskimo, and in English, in normal English, we have basically two words, right? Snow and sleet.
Yes.
So, and how does it affect the way you think? I think language channels your thinking, but I don't think it constrains it. In fact, I think it, if anything, helps you. It helps you think. It helps you have new ideas because it's so productive and so open-ended. So I don't think that you're sort of constrained by the structure of your language. On the contrary, in fact, that's my opinion, at least.
Okay, cool. Okay, so language. I mean, you mentioned once the use of language in your book and how to make noises and influence people. And
Yeah.
so, are there any other purposes that language serve other than to influence people?
I think that's the main purpose that it serves, but I think it serves all sorts of other purposes too that we don't think about so much. It seems to be a way of organizing your own thoughts for yourself. Lots of people kind of, if you just imagine you just jot down a to-do list for yourself at the beginning of the day, you're not really influencing anyone else or communicating with anyone else. You're just organizing yourself, right? And so, people do that. And if you think about it, we have language in all sorts of strange situations where it's not really clear what it's for. Like when we dream in language, like which everyone does. It's not really clear what the purpose of that is. So I think language can be used for all kinds of different things. It's an extremely flexible tool. We mainly use it for communication and to get other people to do things, right? To influence other people in one way or another. But it's definitely not its only use.
Okay. So, as an author and linguist, Ian, do you have like a favorite chapter or core idea that you covered in this particular book?
There are two parts of the book that I like particularly. I think one is the chapter which is called "How to Find Lost Languages," and it's about the history of languages, and indeed about how we can develop ideas about languages which have disappeared completely. The other thing is actually it's part of one of the chapters, the chapter on psycholinguistics, which is called "How to Learn a Language and How to Lose a Language," it is in fact the part that talks about how children learn their first language, because that is the most amazing thing. I mean, any parent who has watched their children go from just gurgling and babbling at say 6 months old to by the time they start grade school at 5 or 6 they can speak, right? I mean they can communicate perfectly well, and how children achieve that is really quite an amazing feat. And we know quite a lot about that now, the stages that children go through and so on. So I described that, and I was pleased with that section, particularly pleased with that one.
All right, cool. So, getting a little bit into dead languages. I mean, I'm particularly curious about this because, I'm sure there's some like, I watch some movies that are supposedly where the actors supposedly speak in a dead language. I think like Apocalypto, I think. Now, such languages, how are they reconstructed? I mean, they're dead. The people who spoke them are dead, and chances are they don't have any written records. How do linguists reconstruct those things?
Right. Well, there's two things here. One is, I mean, there are some languages which are no longer spoken, but which we have texts for, records. Then, of course, there's an issue about how things were pronounced. If it was, if we don't have any sound recordings, if the things are more than about 100 years old. And then there's the question of languages which have completely disappeared and whose existence we can just kind of infer, right? And then we can sort of invent the languages. There is a technique for actually doing that. If you have if you know something about the languages that are descended from the dead language, then you can make inferences based on the related forms in the languages that you have as to what the forms of the older language must have looked like. That's what I talk about in that chapter of the book that I was just mentioning. I sort of describe that in detail.
Okay. So for the benefit, for just a thumbnail sketch of what it's like, I mean, can you give us an example? Like I'm thinking maybe we're speaking English right now, but something about
Hmm.
the language that English sprang from, some really old, I don't know, dead, forgotten language.
Yeah. Well, English, the oldest form of English that we have any record of is just called Old English or Anglo-Saxon. And that was the language that was spoken in England by the Anglo-Saxons starting from about 500 AD. And the very oldest texts we have are from about 700 AD
Hmm.
because not many texts have survived and it wasn't really a literate society at that time. Before Old English was brought over to Great Britain from Northern Europe, and is closely related to German.
Hmm.
And in fact, there's a common ancestor language to English, German, Dutch, and the Scandinavian languages that we call Proto-Germanic.
Okay.
And we don't have any record of that language, but we know it must have existed.
Right.
And that language, in turn, we can go back further, is related to Latin and to ancient Greek,
Okay.
and in fact to Sanskrit, the ancient language of northern India. And the common ancestor language to all of those is called Indo-European.
Uh-huh.
And that's a language, again, that we have no record of.
Hmm.
We don't even know for sure when or where it was spoken, but we can reconstruct quite a lot of it. And again, as I say, I go into detail on that in this chapter of the book that I was mentioning.
Okay, interesting. So we could be, I mean, so English is descent from Greek, so we could literally be talking Greek right now.
Right, right. Well, it doesn't exactly descend from Greek. It's like Greek is a distant cousin,
Oh,
and English and Greek have like a common grandparent. That would be the way to think about it.
oh,
Um, yeah,
yeah.
but English and Greek are related. You can actually prove that,
Oh,
which
interesting.
is interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
so I suppose all the languages in the world spoken nowadays, they have some sort of genealogy, something similar to that then.
Yes, all of them do. The thing is that as we sort of go back in time reconstructing languages, it gets harder and harder to do in a reliable way the further back you try to go.
Yeah.
So this language Indo-European that I was mentioning is thought to have been spoken about 5,000 years ago. It may be related to other languages of Asia and Africa. It probably is, but it's very, very difficult to really prove it.
Right.
So we can't go back much more than about 5, maybe 6, 7, 8,000 years, but not much more than that. And as you may remember at the beginning, I said that humans have been speaking for at least 50,000 years.
Oh yeah.
So we can't go back the whole way
Right.
as things stand. Unfortunately, it's very frustrating.
Well, yeah, I guess, but I mean, gotta work with what you got. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if there's no
Yeah.
literature at the time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No, it's pretty good to go back 5,000 years, And as I said, we can prove English is related somewhat distantly to Greek, also to say Hindi,
Hmm.
and a whole bunch of other languages of India, which a lot of people are very surprised about. But again, like I say, you can prove it. So.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So, I'm just curious, Ian. Have you done like a survey of the different languages of the world?
I personally haven't because that's really too much for, for one individual.
All right.
In linguistics, this is ongoing. There is actually a website you can go to called the World Atlas of Language Structures,
Oh,
which gives information about different aspects of up to, it's just over 2,000 languages, which is about a third of the languages that are spoken in the world.
okay.
So that's fascinating. You can just go and surf it if you want to take a look.
Okay. What's the website again?
It's called the World Atlas of Language Structures, or WALS for short. If you just Google WALS, you'll get it.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, any listeners out there interested in in language, check that out. I mean, it sounds like an
Yeah.
interesting website to be on.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, on the topic of so on the topic of learning a new language, I mean,
Mhm.
we know that kids, I mean, babies, they learn languages very quickly. And we
Yes.
adults, we've got a bit more difficulty learning languages.
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
as an adult, is there anything I can do that could possibly enable me to learn the language much more quickly than I would if I did it on my own?
Um, that's a very difficult question, and there's a certain amount of controversy about that. I think that really there's no substitute, if you can do it in practical terms, for just immersing yourself in the language. Really, the best way to get proficient in a language is, once you've got a certain basic knowledge that you can get from a book or online or whatever,
Right.
is to try and just, practice it. And the ideal way to do that is go somewhere where they speak it and try to avoid speaking English, which
Right.
in a lot of parts of the world is very difficult.
True.
And just immerse yourself. That's it's kind of tough, but it's, I think, probably the quickest and definitely the most effective way of getting proficient.
Okay, cool. I got that. Cool. So, Ian, are there any other topics in the book that you're also kind of interested in? Something that really caught your attention as well?
Well, I mean, the book as a whole gives a kind of overview of the whole field of linguistics, as I said, and there's a couple of chapters where what I was kind of grappling with was trying to present some very difficult ideas in an accessible way.
Right.
And I'm curious, whenever someone tells me they've read it, I always ask them about these one or two chapters. There's the one on semantics called How to Build a World, and it's about meaning, which is a very difficult topic. I didn't kind of shy away from presenting some of the difficulties, and so I always ask people when they tell me they've read the book what they thought of that chapter. So.
Okay, cool. I got that. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
So, Ian, there's a lot. There are bound to be a lot of books out there in language. A lot of them are intended for the academe. What is it about the wonders of language that make an average Joe like me think, maybe I should get this sort of thing?
Well, it's short.
Okay.
It's only 150 pages, and I deliberately kept it short to make it accessible. It really does give you this quick overview. All the chapters are quite short, and they just give the essentials of the various fields and the various ideas that linguists have. So, I mean, what I would say is that this is the sort of relatively quick, relatively easy way of getting a handle on some quite difficult topics.
Okay, I got that. So, okay, I would just like to acknowledge that it is raining right now. I'm not sure if you can hear that in the background.
Oh, I can, yeah.
I can. Okay, well, yeah. Just to let you and our listeners know, it's raining over here right now. Okay, so just like to acknowledge that. So, Ian, let's say you met up with a person who realized was kind of interested about language, kind of interested in learning about it, and you had only enough time to tell that person one thing about language. What would be that one thing you would tell that person, and why?
I would tell them that we are mostly very unaware of the complexity and the potential of language that we all have inside us. And the reason for that is because we're sort of immersed in language all the time. In the book, I say that we are as unaware of language as fish are of water, because we're just immersed in it. And if you really try and take a step back and think about it, it is a truly amazing thing, and it's an amazing gift we have as a species. So I think that's what I would tell people.
Right, interesting words right there. So, Ian, is there anything else, like other stories or topics you may want to explore in the future?
Well, with a couple of colleagues in Cambridge, we're thinking about writing a book called 60 Languages That Changed the World. And we want to look at various languages from around the world and how they've all impacted on human culture. So that's a project that's really just only in its infancy at the moment, but we're talking to a couple of publishers, and I think it's going to be a nice idea.
Well, definitely. I mean, language, it definitely has an impact on human history, so personally, I think it would be an interesting book to read. Cool. Okay, so...
Yeah, so that one in a year or two.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just said watch out for that one in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, definitely. Me personally, I'm going to be on the lookout for that one too.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So, in closing then, the book is The Wonders of Language, or How to Make Noises and Influence People. The author is our guest, Mr. Ian Roberts, and you can check out his book at Amazon and also the Cambridge University Press at the website www.cambridge.org. Again, that's www.cambridge.org. So, Ian, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being an author story. It was very insightful having you with us here today.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it. It was a pleasure.
Cool. So, if any of you listeners want to know about this very human topic, please feel free to go ahead and check out The Wonders of Language. You can do so right now by going to the Amazon link in the description below the video. And if you'd like to follow our author interviews on YouTube, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. So bye for now, everyone. I'll be back on Author Story next time with another inspiring author.